Law for Life, the podcast, with Franklins Solicitors.
Hello, welcome to Law for Life for the Franklins podcast. It's great to be joined in the studio this time by Zoe Hale from the family law team. Hello, Zoe.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you. And today we're talking about something which I think is going to affect a lot of couples of all different ages, but people that have just started living together in their relationship. They're not married yet, but they're living in the same property. And this is cohabitation law. And this is a bit of a minefield. And this is something that I think a lot of people are aware of, but they don't really understand how it works and how it might apply to them. So today we're hopefully going to get some clarity on that and go through exactly where you stand if you're getting into that kind of position. And it is quite common, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's quite a common area of law. It's kind of one of the growing fastest area of law and family law, because a lot of couples are deciding not to get married. That might be for a number of different reasons why they're not getting married, but they're tending to buy a house with their partner. But cohabitation law doesn't just involve unmarried couples. It can also involve people who just want to live together as friends, but also siblings that move in together as well.
Wow, you see, I didn't realise that. I thought it was only if you're in a relationship. I guess if you're living in the same house with housemates, then there's a lot involved in that as well. So let's start at the beginning. What is cohabitation law and what does it actually involve? So
cohabitation law does usually relate to unmarried couples, but as I've already said, it does relate to couples who, not necessarily who are in couples, but it could be same-sex couples as well, but it could also be friends who are looking to move in together, perhaps after university, but it also could be siblings who are moving in together as well. Unfortunately, there isn't any formal definition of cohabitation in English law, so it is quite wide, but as I've already said, it is a growing kind of area of family law. As I've said, people are not tending to get married anymore for whatever reason that might be. I think the kind of last census report that we did, it was 1 in 5 couples are deciding not to get married and just deciding to move in together.
Wow, that's quite a high number. So is there such a thing as cohabitation rights?
So one of the biggest misconceptions in this kind of area of family law is the idea of a common law marriage. I have had a lot of people come to me and say that I have the same rights as somebody who has been living together with my partner for this long. We have children together, we own a house together, but that's not the case, unfortunately.
Okay, is this something that's changed in the past? Because it was something that I'd always heard about common law.
No, so it's something that's never actually existed. So it is a really big common misconception that people think that a common law marriage does exist. So unmarried couples do not have the same rights in relation to financial matters, particularly as married couples do. Okay,
so what happens when there aren't any protections in place? So say you separate, and what happens to the property? What happens to the stuff that you've bought together?
So it does tend to be the case where couples do buy a property together and they're not married. So sometimes that can cause some difficulties if the relationship does break down. If the parties are quite amicable, we could put in together a separation agreement for them. But usually in relation to the property, it will depend on how the property is held, whether that is jointly owned together or whether one person owns the property. And it will also depend whether the property is held in joint ownership or whether it's held as tenants in common.
Okay, and so that's important, not who's contributed what to the property. So if you're paying into a property but you don't own it, do you have any rights there at all?
So that's where it gets kind of difficulty, and that's where the biggest difference is between married couples and non-married couples, because there are different specific criteria that we have to make depending on the different areas of law. So for married couples, the courts would look into consideration of the Section 25 Matrimonial Causes Act. However, if the property is owned by one person or if it is owned by 2 people, and there is disputes as to how they want to deal with the property when they do break up, we would have to look under Talata proceedings. So that
I'm loving all this jargon. This is cool. So what are the Talata proceedings?
So it is a really big mouthful. So Talata stands for Trust of Land and Appointment of Trustees Act 1996, or otherwise known as Talata. So that's the specific set of rules that unmarried couples do have to abide by to go through if there's any difficulties with the properties.
Okay, so that sounds quite complicated, and this is something where you need to get some advice. So if you are cohabiting, might it be a good idea to look at having the property in both of your names if you're both pay money into it to keep things simple?
I think so, yes. That's one of the main protections for people who are living together, who might not have put the same amount of contributions into the property. We would also recommend that if it's in relation to property ownership, that they also put a declaration of trust in place so that it's really clear as to how the property is actually owned.
Okay, and there's obviously a lot more to it than just property, because you might have a joint bank account, you might have savings together, you might both be saving up for a holiday, and you don't know when you're going to split up. Sometimes things happen, sometimes people aren't as as predictable as you think they might be. So when you do separate, how do you sort out all of that kind of stuff?
So just in relation to any kind of joint bank accounts that they have, any savings that they have together, it's really common that couples will open a joint bank account together because they'll put, if they have a mortgage on the property, mortgage outgoings, any household expenses. But if the relationship breaks down, we do get clients that come to us and say, well, what happens with the joint savings? What happens with the joint account? So in that instance, if the account is held in joint names, we would say that both parties have an equal right to it. However, disputes may arise if one couple's put more money in than the other. So what we would suggest that they do in the meantime, while they're coming to kind of a amicable agreement between each other, we would ask them to speak to their bank to let them know that this is happening. They could put a freeze on the account to say that we don't want any kind of outgoings going on this account until we've managed to sort this out. We could also ask our clients to speak to the bank to see if they could put something in writing to say that one person cannot take something out of the account while they're sorting this out. So anything would have to be in writing in order to take it in the account. But we do have to make clients aware that there is payments of the mortgage going out, there is outgoings, there is direct debits. So they do want to try and get that solved as quickly and as amicably as possible.
Yeah, so it's probably better to plan these things in advance. What can you do to avoid getting into that kind of situation? So
one of the main kind of things that they can do to protect themselves is by putting in place a cohabitation agreement, usually before that they do start moving in together. It can seem really unromantic in the beginning because it's very exciting when you're first buying your house together with your partner, and kind of putting something in place when it's a matter of fact that the relationship is looking to end, as that's what cohabitation is.
Yeah, because I think you never really want to broach the subject that this might not last forever, because when you're in that kind of honeymoon period in your relationship, you're thinking, oh, this is it. This is my forever home with my person that I'm going to stay with forever. But you've got to be realistic.
Exactly. I think a lot of people don't have that forward thinking because they're all in that stage where they think this is so exciting, I'm really in love with this person, but some people are not thinking what protections they can put in place moving forward if the relationship does come to an end. So cohabitation agreements are one of those things that they can put in place.
But if they come and see you or a solicitor, you're not going to ruin their relationship by saying, like, come on guys, you're probably going to split up, let's face it, 8 out of 10 marriages ended. These sort of stats. It's not going to, it's just prudent and sensible planning for eventualities.
Exactly. We wouldn't have a client come to us and say that you need to plan for your relationship to end, because of course we don't want any of that to happen, but we're trying to put it in a way to make sure that they protect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So when's the best moment to draw up that cohabitation agreement? Would that be as you're about to move in together, or once you're already in the property? So
a cohabitation agreement can be made between both parties at any time, but we would usually suggest that it is done before they move in together.
Okay, and do you need any kind of agreement if you're not living together, if you're in separate houses, or maybe you're both contributing to a property that you're renting out? Do you need kind of agreements in place for that as well?
If it's a property that you're renting out together but you're living in that property, we would still suggest, even if it's a rental property that you're going into, we would still put that cohabitation agreement in place. If it's a property purchase that you're actually buying the house, we would still recommend to put the cohabitation agreement in place as well.
Okay, and what if there's nothing to do with property, if you're just two people in a relationship with a joint bank account that have savings and stuff, and you still want to protect the money that you're putting into that account?
So that's kind of tend to be less common, where we would put a cohabitation agreement just for that specific reason. One of the main reasons to put a cohabitation agreement together is just
Cohabitation.
Actually, people living together.
Okay. And what's a declaration of trust then? Is that a different kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's a big stipulation between having a declaration of trust and having a cohabitation agreement. Why would I need both? A lot of people say, well, I've got declaration of trust, why do I need a cohabitation agreement? But a declaration of trust's main kind of function is to put in place the actual ownership of the property, whereas a cohabitation agreement kind of does more than that. So it looks to how any kind of mortgages and household expenses are going to be put in place, any bank accounts as well. What are the arrangements if the relationship does break down and that person wants to buy each other's share out of the property, if they want to get rid of the property completely, if they want to sell at the end of the relationship, what that would look like, and any kind of arrangements if the parties do have children together.
Okay, and are there things that don't tend to get included in a cohabitation agreement?
So one of the main reasons, as I've said, is whilst you can make financial provision for children in cohabitation agreements, we can't make arrangements as to contact arrangements for children, as that would be under a different kind of section of law under the Children's Act. And because the courts have to take into account the welfare of the child, we need to take in the best interest of the child at that specific point of time. You can't future plan ahead of that.
Okay, so what do you do if your circumstances do change after you've drawn up the cohabitation agreement?
So we would always recommend that whenever circumstances change, the cohabitation agreement should be kind of reviewed periodically, and that is usually after kind of a big event has happened in couples' lives. So that's the birth of a child, or if one of the couples has received like a big inheritance from a family member who's just passed away. So in the cohabitation agreement itself, we can put in a review clause to kind of make sure that the cohabitation agreement is reviewed at that specific point when that event occurs. So that's one of the ways that we can change the cohabitation agreement, and it should always be kept up to date in any event anyway.
Yeah. So I guess also if one of you loses your job, or
Yes.
if you start a family and somebody's not working and the other person is, there's lots of things that are going to happen during the course of your relationship where you might want to have another look at things.
Yeah, we do understand that things do change, so it is important that these kind of agreements do keep being updated periodically as best as to what your circumstances are in that moment.
So do you actually need a solicitor to draw up a cohabitation agreement? Is it something that you can get AI to do for you?
So AI is a big growing thing in the legal sector. However, we don't recommend that you use AI in order to draft up a cohabitation agreement or any kind of legal agreement for that matter. So we do ask the couples who come to us to make sure that they are legally represented, just to make sure that they understand the implications of what they're actually agreeing to, and to make sure that they actually understand that themselves. As solicitors, we can't represent both people who are cohabitating together just due to a conflict of interest perspective, but we would make sure that each is kind of individually represented so that they know what they're signing.
That's interesting. So you've got to pay 2 lots of solicitors, have you, to do that?
So we do understand that legal cost is a big factor when coming in and doing these agreements. So what would usually happen is one solicitor would draft up the cohabitation agreement, and then the other party whose solicitor is not the one drafting it up would go and see somebody specific and say, can you please just give me some legal advice as to what this all means, and then they can come back with any amendments, any kind of concerns, and then we can move forward from that point.
Okay, fantastic. And what do you need to bring along to get the cohabitation agreement drawn up? What kind of documents and evidence do you need? So
we would need to know the parties' finances in particular. The solicitors would ask both parties to go through what's called financial disclosure. So that'd be the value of any assets, any savings, any accounts that they have, any joint accounts as well. If they're looking at buying the property together, then any details of the property or any kind of other details of property that they might actually have held in their sole names. We'd also have a look at what actual assets, so what people have got in terms of like personal property as well. So say for example, if they've bought specific things for the property, how would that be divided between both parties if the relationship was to break up? So those kind of things.
And what if one of them owns a business, or they have other kind of big assets that need to be included in that. Is that all kind of factored in?
So we can factor that one in. It's I'm not too sure whether that is something that I've done before, but we do get clients that come to us in relation to their businesses to say that they do want to protect their business.
Yeah, sure. So how would you go about enforcing it legally? Say the worst comes to the worst and you have a disagreement about this. Is this something that you can hold up the cohabitation agreement in court and get what you're entitled to?
So cohabitation agreements are governed by contract law. So provided that the cohabitation agreement meets the criteria that it was properly executed, properly drafted, signed as a deed, there should be no issues with it being held up in court and saying this is what we signed, this is what we've agreed. There are only kind of certain factors where a person can say that this cohabitation agreement is not legally enforceable because, for example, that they've signed under duress. And that is one of the main reasons why we ask both of the cohabitants to get kind of legal advice on it so that they understand what they're actually signing their name to.
Okay, cool. And are there any changes that might happen in the law for cohabitation in the foreseeable future?
So this is a really interesting topic about how it might change because, as I've already said, cohabitants don't have the same legal rights as married couples. And we are still waiting for the government to make kind of a decision as to how that's going to be progressing. We have been waiting for such a long time for them to see what they were going to do about it. And we're hoping that something's going to come out this spring. So it is kind of a topic that is still developing and we're still waiting to see what happens.
Okay, so it's probably worth saying that we're recording this in March 2026.
Yes.
So if you're watching this or listening to this at some point in the future, things might have changed. So it's worth
definitely
double checking if this is all still relevant
yes,
advice.
Definitely.
Yes, brilliant. Okay, so obviously the best thing to do, as we always say, is get some professional advice, and Franklins Solicitors are there in Milton Keynes and Northampton ready to talk to you and give you a friendly face of advice.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. That was Zoe Hale from the Family Law team at Franklins.